Oddly enough, for me, high school graduation was the worst day of my life. I know it may sound odd or strange, but it's true. There's so much that I remember about this day specifically, and to be quite honest, I think I've only confided this to maybe one person on this whole planet, maybe. But to be quite honest, the reason for making this video is to finally get it off my chest. Despite almost being in my third year of college, I feel like it's finally time to put the past behind me, put this story out here of what I consider the worst day ever, the graduation from hell. What do I remember about this day? Well, before that, I just want to say that I am someone who most certainly has at least some form of anxiety, mostly in the social context, I would say. The reason for this is rather obvious once I tell you. That being, every single first day of school, I believe, in high school, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure I threw up. I just couldn't even handle basic socialization after taking big summer breaks and just not seeing people for a while and just being generally lazy. So that's the groundwork that I was working with here, going into my high school graduation. Now, I probably was also in a depressive mood at the time, I'm willing to admit, and the reason I say this is pretty simple, really. Because you would expect a graduation to be a good thing, but I was just so anxious and wanted to leave as soon as possible. So, what do I remember about that day? Most certainly, I didn't get a lot of sleep that day, more than likely. And that's because my sleep schedule was just horrible. Many things contributed to this, in all honesty. My dad working far away from home, so he wasn't around to keep me in check in any way, and my sleep schedule just spiraled out of control and hasn't recovered, to be quite honest. And that's what I remember beginning the day, was waking up, more than likely at least. I don't remember exactly because I've wanted to block this day out of my memory, to be quite honest. But that aside, what I remember about that day is never being happy. Despite the day supposedly being something that you're supposed to be happy and excited for, it never was for me. Let's start with the basics. My walking partner. My good friend, I'll give him a nickname, J-Man. Oh, and I totally forgot to mention at this part too, I was just generally going through a lot of strife with friends at the time, us growing more distant, that kind of thing. Not with this friend specifically, but just with other friends in general. J-Man was someone who I really, to be quite honest, only became friends with within the last year or two of high school, in senior and junior years. So he was definitely my probable best friend at the time. But what sucked about this is that there were likely other candidates I could have chosen. But the thing is that they wouldn't have chosen me. So thanks to J-Man for being my walking partner. He was a cool guy, let's just say. But beyond that, what I remember too is the rehearsal. So fucking pointless, in all honesty. The train of events for me, just because I've mostly blocked them out, in all honesty, really begin at the lunchtime during that day. I felt so fucking sick. I couldn't eat at all. Despite going to an expensive sushi restaurant, one of my favorites in my town, and having my grandpa there to pay for it too, if I'm not mistaken, I just couldn't eat anything. I couldn't stomach it at all. I was so nervous. I was just constantly looking down. And what I remember from that is going to the bathroom and throwing up. I drank a smoothie earlier that day, and let's just say it all came back up. It felt really embarrassing, and it was really obvious that I didn't even want to be there to begin with. The next major thing that comes to mind is somehow, I ended up being late, almost, to going to school to meet up with your group to get into your bus to go to graduation. I remember being, I think, the last person to arrive in the classroom of my group. This to me was extremely nerve-wracking, and I was just so nervous just sitting there. I was gripping my cords very tight, I remember vividly. And probably the worst part of the day of graduation, too, was the girl I liked, and one of many of the girls that I quote-unquote liked in high school, was in the classroom next to us. And the thing was that the door was open, so kids in each classroom could talk or whatever. And that was very... and that triggered my anxiety big time, as if it wasn't already from all the previous stuff, let's just say. And to be quite honest, it didn't stop there. The next thing I do remember is, despite barely being on time, we all filed out to our buses, where of course we took a breathalyzer test. And despite not being a drinker and not liking beer or alcohol of any kind, it's just still nerve-wracking nonetheless, having police there breathalyzing. Just because. I don't even know why. Looking back on it, I don't even know why it really makes me nervous, but I guess it did, to be quite honest. The next major thing I can remember is that on our way to where we were graduating in the buses, I remember at some point, somehow, the cap to my cap fell off, if that makes any sense. The top screw-on bit that holds the cord in place on your cap, it somehow fell off. And I had to append it with gum, because that's all I had on me. And oh boy, the cap and gown sure were cheaply made because of that. So, gee, how can I even summarize this? I was sick, I was super nervous, I didn't want to be there, I had already gone through so much shit I hadn't eaten, I was, questioning everything, was wondering if I fucking smelled, I don't know. Who knows what I was thinking back then, but I was just so nervous. I felt really hot and sweaty the whole time. It might have been a combo of just general anxiety and having the gown on, because, I don't know. So, we get there, I go in, but the thing is that it takes so long. You're standing around there, waiting for people to shuffle in for hours, really, and it's just so nerve-wracking. When you finally do make your way down there, well, what do you have to do? You have to sit around for another really long time until your name is called. Because, to be quite honest, I didn't really have a small class, I would say, and I live in a town of around 100K, so one high school out of 3, I don't know what that would average out to be quite honest, but more than likely a couple hundred, in the couple hundreds, I would say. And, well, me and my partner were called within the first half, thankfully. But the one thing I do remember, though, is after getting up there, looking back on it now, maybe it's not so bad, but at the time I just was overthinking it and thought it was the cringiest thing ever. But I got my, diploma or whatever, and was walking down the ramp for, the person to take a picture or whatever. And I remember, throwing up a peace sign or something like that. See, thinking back on it now, it's, not a big deal, but at the time, I thought it was pretty cringy, in all honesty. And I wonder if anyone even remembers that. But I did kind of skip over one more thing, too. While we were standing around, before we walked over to chairs where we sat, I remember one thing explicitly. I don't remember who, I don't remember their name, but I just remember hearing some rumor, some kid asked out some girl and she said yes or something. I don't know, maybe she didn't say yes, I don't even remember, but the point is that some kid had the balls to do this, and that felt very contrasting to me, who on the other hand, was completely unsure and just never confided to the girl or girls that I liked, that I even liked them. Or maybe I did, I don't know, maybe they thought less of me. I have no idea, to be quite honest, but what can you expect from high school, right? I was really not experienced enough in high school, to be quite honest. I didn't really make the best moves, so to speak, and was usually more of an individualist. And to be quite honest, these kinds of things, I mean, in all honesty, I never really actively went after women, to be quite honest, and there wasn't really a reason to. What's the point, really? But the point is, fuck all of this, okay? The point is that some other guy did something that I never would have, and that just made me even more anxious. Can you really blame me? So, after graduating and, you know, everyone splitting up and going their own separate ways, it, for some reason, took me forever to find my parents between texting them, and that sucked. But eventually we finally worked our way out. But, of course, more than likely with any high school graduation with a lot of people and whatnot, there was a ton of traffic and it took forever to get out of the parking lot. And it took forever to get back home. Unfortunately as well, I was super hungry, obviously. Because I didn't really eat lunch and like I said before, I yacked a smoothie at said lunch. I was really running on empty. I just wanted to get home and get some food in me. Which, if I'm not mistaken, I did end up doing, thankfully. Because of course, it was my graduation, I could kind of request anything, to be quite honest. And I ended up getting fed. If I'm not mistaken, I ended up eating something. I'm pretty sure it was past 9 p.m. or maybe past, I think, 10 p.m. even at that point. But I remember that meal. I don't even remember what it was, but I just remember it tasting so damn good after a really long day.